Hello, Keith.
Hey, Jeff.
Alrighty, so here we are. We're talking about the state budget. And one question we want to talk about, there is obviously the expense side of the budget, but there's also the revenue side of the budget. And I don't know that everyone necessarily has the clearest idea about where the state gets its money from. So maybe we could walk through a little bit of that.
Well, the workhorse by far of the state budget is the income tax. And a lot of people my age remember that that's been around since 1991. But actually, if you really want to talk about that, you have to go back even farther because we've been taxing income, certain types, in Connecticut since the early 1970s. Back then, we were taxing folks who make a lot of money from capital gains and dividends, which you'd kind of expect us being so close to Wall Street. We had separate taxes just on those. That all got rolled into the income tax in 1991, but that investment-related income is still a big part of that income tax stream. About 35% of that $9 billion people pay quarterly. It doesn't come out of the paycheck withholding, and that's money that's related to capital gains and dividends.
But it's also really variable.
Highly. It's by far the most volatile part of our tax stream. In the 90s and the 2000s, some people might remember those tax rebate checks Connecticut sent out in the late 1990s. When that would happen, that part of our income tax stream, that part related to capital gains and dividends, it would grow 20% a year for like 4 or 5 years in a row.
What about the sales tax?
That's our second largest. That is about $4.2 billion. It's about 21% of the general fund, so we're talking about 1/5. Most of the items in the sales tax are at about 6.35%. We do have some luxury items for expensive cars and jewelry.
So we've got sales tax, income tax, capital gains tax, part of the income tax. What else do we tax, big picture?
Everything. We have a corporation tax. We get about just under $1 billion. One thing to note, though, is that now the numbers are starting to get smaller, Jeff. All these other levies, none of these that we're about to talk about raise more than $400 million, and I'm making that sound like that's small money. But compared to a $9 billion income tax stream, it's a lot less. We tax hospitals, cigarettes and tobacco products, utilities. We tax estates, provided they're worth more than $2 billion.
So, Keith, as we wrap up, tell me then, as state lawmakers seem to always be looking for solutions, there are a few levers. One, it has to do with changing existing agreements, which seems like a tough thing to do. Then there is the expense side of the budget. And then there's the revenue side of the budget, which provides the greatest room for possibility.
Think of using a hammer. If you choke up on the hammer, you have lots of control but very little power. So you might have to hit the nail 10 times to drive it in. If you put your hand at the end of the hammer, you get a lot of power, but you might smash your thumb. It's the same thing with the tax system. You talked about the volatility. If you lean heavily on the income tax, you could, if it's a good year, get a lot of money. On the other hand, if you count too heavily on it and we go into recession and $1 or $2 billion of income tax receipts vanishes because the economy slips, you're going to do the budgetary equivalent of smashing your thumb. So you really have to weigh not just how much you raise in taxes versus how much you spend, but what types of taxes you raise, because you've got to be able to predict how much money's coming in. It's a balancing act.
I'm keeping my thumbs out of the way.
That sounds good.
All right, Keith Phaneuf covers state finances and the economy for the Connecticut Mirror. Thanks for joining us, Keith.
Thanks.